people, what is up and welcome back to my channel. I am Jamila and I love all things beauty. I love all things makeup, I love all things skincare, and I especially love sharing my tips and tricks for how to find high-end and luxury beauty products at bargain prices. If that sounds like something you are interested in, I would absolutely love if you would consider subscribing and joining the family. Okay, so you guys already saw from the title and the thumbnail what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to be sharing 5 indie brands that someone who is new to indie, or if you are new to indie, should definitely 100% check out. Now, I will link my previous video before, but I did like a chatty get ready talking about my chatty get ready with me. What did I forget the last 2 words? Talking about my sort of indie journey and the good, bad, and ugly parts of shopping indie. And after doing that, I was like, okay, that might have been like a little bit of a negative video. So I wanted to share kind of like my recommendations for someone who's just kind of like new to indie makeup and wanting to know sort of where to start. So I thought I would share just 5 brands because there are a lot of brands out there, and just give you guys sort of like, my recommendations when it comes to diving into this market. These are some solid brands to start with. All right, so without further ado, let's just dive right in. Okay, so the first brand that I want to start with is one that I'm pretty sure you've heard a ton of creators talk about, and that is Sydney Grace. Now, Sydney Grace is a brand that I would say like pretty recently got introduced to. And by recently, I'm not gonna mean, it's not like yesterday or last year. Like, I'm pretty sure I started buying from them in 2020. So many creators talked about Sydney Grace shadows, and they were talking about Sydney Grace singles, but I really started buying once they had their palettes. And what I love about the Sydney Grace formula is that it's just a solid, consistent brand. Now, this is the collab that they did with Mel Thompson, the Tiny Marvels palette, and this is one of my most unique color stories. Like, this is not something that I ever in my wildest dreams would have reached for or pulled together, and Mel did such an amazing job with this. And what I love, like I said, about the Sydney Grace formula is that it's just consistent. So here are 2 of the shimmers. I think their matte formula is actually really nice. It's definitely not something that I would write home about, but their shimmer formula is this like beautiful metallic shade. Like, you can see that this one shade here is a duochrome, so it does kind of like shift. But overall, their shimmer formula is just one of the most just vibrant and metallic that you will ever find. And that's what I love about the Sydney Grace formula, is that whenever I use their shadows, I feel like there are no duds. Like, I feel like I always get really, really good, consistent products, which I appreciate. Now, if you are looking to get into Sydney Grace, I definitely recommend checking out the Mel Thompson palette because it is, a very unique color story, like I said. I also recommend you looking into their collab with Temptalia. I think that the palettes that Temptalia pulled together have some really, really nice color stories that anybody could use, and I think there is a palette for everyone. So it's a trio of palettes. Most of them are like, all 3 of them are pretty jewel toned, so if you don't really like jewel tones, you may not like it. But like I said, they have other palettes if you want to look into them. But it's just absolutely beautiful, and the quality is phenomenal. Just so great. What I also love about Sydney Grace, which is why I think it's one of the brands that someone that's new to indie should 100% check out, is the fact that when they create their palettes, they create a deep color story and a light color story. So if you are a deeper complexion, that deep color story will have deeper mattes, so you can have more appropriate transition shades and deepening up shades. And if you are a lighter complexion, you will have lighter mattes. So I love the ability to have that sort of choice in depth in a palette. Like, most of the times, or a lot of the time, you like people like me, if you are a deeper complexion, you'll get a palette and they will have some of these very, very light shades that we just don't use because they just don't work with our skin tone, or they're too light for us. So it's nice to have the option to completely get rid of those lighter shades and have some deeper shades that are more appropriate for us as transition shades and as deepening up shades. So the next brand that I want to talk about is just like a really solid base brand. And by that, I mean that it's going to give you some of the best mattes that you can find in the market, in the indie market. When it comes to indie makeup, one of the things you'll realize as you dive into this sort of market is that most of these brands are putting out shimmers. You'll get shimmers, you'll get metallics, you'll get toppers, and you'll get some duochromes and some multichromes. But they're all that sort of shiny, sparkly, shifty, formula. Like, that's what you're going to get for the most part when it comes to indie eyeshadow. And I found that I haven't really been able to find brands that have spectacular mattes until I discovered Blend Bunny Cosmetics. Now, the first palette that they released was their Blends palette, and I picked this up and had it sitting in my collection for months before I tried it. And then when I finally tried this palette, which I know it looks new, but trust me, I've been using this, I was blown away by the quality of these mattes. Like, I have some Viseart mattes, and I still want to reach for this more than I reach for my Viseart mattes, because these shadows are just so beautiful, so pigmented, and so blendable. Now, if you just want to have mattes alone, I say go with the Blends palette first, because you get those neutral shades in this bottom row, but then you get all of the primary colors: blues, green, pinks, purple. So everything that you need to have like a transition shade, a deepening up shade for any color category. And what I love about it is that all of the shades are in trios. So if you cover this half of the palette, you'll realize that you have a light shade, medium, deep, and it just goes in those rows. Same on this side. So you'll see the light green, medium green, deep green. And that's how it goes throughout. So you have all of the shades that you could possibly need to create a really, really stunning look. And if you have a huge single, shimmer formula, if you have a huge single eyeshadow collection, I think that this is a great companion palette, because you can pop some mattes on the lid and then reach into your single shadows and use that one to just finish up the look. Now, if you want something that's a little bit extra, the Surge palette is definitely my recommendation. This is my favorite palette from the brand. I will say that this brand does not have a ton of releases. There are only 3 palettes, so not a lot to choose from. But I love this one. I have to stop myself from using this palette because it's so amazing. And this was the first time that they gave us shimmers. Now, I do have the older formulation of shimmers, which is just a little bit more creamy than I think the brand owner wanted it. So there is a new formula that's just a little bit less creamy, but I have no issue with this. This performs really well. What I love about this palette is that you get these light shades, which are blend out shades for someone of a deeper complexion, but transition shades for someone of a lighter complexion. And then you have neons, which we don't really see neons in the same palette as everything else. Like, you get these really deep grungy shades, you get the neon shades, you get the lighter shades, and then you get a little bit deeper shades. Like, I love the fact that we get all of these shades in this palette. I did do a video using this palette, eyeshadow palette bingo, with Dr. Ash and her makeup, and I will link that down below for you guys to check it out. But this is one that I absolutely love. It is a palette that is always sitting on my desk because I love it so much. And I have one of these 2 palettes on my desk at all times because I often find myself reaching for the matte formula in this to add a little bit extra to my looks. The next brand that I want to talk about has really taken the indie market by storm, and that is Odens Eye Cosmetics. Now, this is a brand that is based in Sweden, but when I tell you I was blown away, 100% blown away. Now, I had heard a lot about Odens Eye. I knew a lot of creators talked about it, but I did not decide to look at this brand until they had their collaboration. What is it? The legendary Daywknd collaboration. So it started with these 3 palettes, and they picked 3 creators to work with: Judy, Tina from the Fancy Face, and Annette from Annette's Makeup Corner. And these were the first palettes that I picked from the brand, and love it. Absolutely love it. Now, when it comes to Odens Eye Cosmetics, the star of the show really is the shimmers. I don't think that their mattes are anything to write home about, but I do think that their shimmer formula is nice because they do have a lot of versatility. For example, this shade here is a multi-chrome, so it does have a really, really nice shift to it. It's stunning. Look at that. And then when it comes to the other shades, some of them are toppers, some of them are a little bit deeper and have a base to it. But I love, love, love the fact that you get that versatility in terms of like a shifty shade, a topper shade, something with a little bit more base to it. I definitely well, these are not available anymore, so you can't pick these up. But I definitely recommend checking out some of their other palettes. I do have a couple more from the brand that I picked up because once I tried these 3, I was like, okay, this is a formula worth checking out. And they do have a new Soul Mane collection that I did order, so that should be coming soon, and I'll be reviewing that. And I think that one has a really nice color story. So Odens Eye is definitely a brand that I think you guys should give a try if you're just getting into the indie market and you want to try some really unique shades. Next, and I think this is the 4th one. Yes. The fourth brand that I want to mention is another one that really took me by storm, and that is Glamlight. Now, I had no interest in checking for Glamlight because that is the brand that releases these food-themed palettes. I don't like when my eyeshadow looks like a hamburger or a pizza or a taco. So I had no interest in trying it. However, they did release a cocktail collection, which I don't think is what it was actually called, but it was based on drinks. So there was the Dirty Martini palette, the wine palette, the chocolate martini, and then I think there was a margarita palette. And what was nice about it is that they came in these wine bottles, but once you opened up the wine bottles, the palette was actually square. And I was like, thank God this is a square palette because it's easier to store and, you know, it just works well. So I picked up 3 out of the 4 palettes, and the first palette that I tried, I like fell in love, and that was the chocolate martini. So this is the neutral palette out of the bunch, and the mattes in here were the first thing that I fell in love with. The mattes are absolutely stunning. The shimmers are really nice too. The one thing I will say about the shimmers is that they do not pick up on a brush. Like, you have to go in with like an actual, like, your finger or like a wet brush in order for it to pick up. So these are 2 of the shades from the chocolate martini palette. It was, look at that pigment. Like, I fell in love with it. The other palette that I grabbed, this was the Dirty Martini. It's a really beautiful green palette. If green is your color, you get some of those like deep grungy olivey greens, but then you do get a little bit of brightness, and there are some, you know, more copper shades for something that's a little bit more neutral leaning. And then the final palette, this was my least favorite because I didn't think it performed the best, and this one actually has the most mattes. This is the wine palette. So you pretty much get pinky purpley shades in this one, and it was okay, it just was not my favorite. I do think this one was, yeah, this one is a duochrome, so it does have a pink purple shift to it. See that? Ooh, that's pretty. I need to play with these again. So I really enjoyed these. And after I tried this, I actually went back and picked up their collab palette with Michaela because I realized that I really enjoyed the mattes in it. It was so blendable, so buildable. It was perfection. And while the shimmers I don't love because, I shouldn't say I don't love. While the shimmers you have to pick up with your fingers, I don't mind it. I know some people hate that. If you don't like having to use your fingers, then you probably won't like this. But when it's on the eye, and I will insert a photo of me using either all 3 or just one out of them because I, blown away, could not get enough of these palettes. And then the 5th and final palette or brand that I want to recommend to you guys is Kaleidos. Yes. Where is this even from? Now, I do believe that Kaleidos is another international brand, so they're not based in the US, but they produce some of the best indie eyeshadows. And I fell in love with their eyeshadow formula when I picked up the Club Nebula palette. Now, first things first, packaging. 10 out of 10 for just uniqueness and just absolutely beautiful. Now, it is chunky, and if you don't like chunky packaging, you won't love this. I do think that they have remade the packaging to make it slightly thinner, so yay them. But overall, it is on the chunky side, but look at that. Look at that. Now, this is the Club Nebula palette. It was a collab with Angelica Nyquist, and it's no longer available. But this was the one that got me in love with the Kaleidos formula, because this is also another brand where you get multiple formulations. So you get multi-chromes, duochromes, topper shades. Look at that. It is stunning. So freaking beautiful. And the mattes are also super pigmented and very rich. So if you have a deeper complexion and you're worried about having mattes that won't show up or may just be a little bit too light, I never experienced that with this. And the other thing too that I appreciate about Kaleidos is that their color stories are super unique. When it comes to having really unique color stories, indie makeup knocks it out of the park, and I think Kaleidos does a particularly special job at making sure that the color stories are stunning. So this second palette here is their Escape Pod palette. I think this is so beautiful for summer, and it is one of the palettes that I reach for when I want a little bit more colorful look, and all of these really bright shades are so rich. So rich. I think these two are a little bit too close for comfort, but you can live without. You can live with both of them, you know. They're slightly different, but I think on the eyes they look the exact same. But look at these two color stories next to each other. It's so unique. Like, you don't get this from mainstream. And like I said, with each of these palettes, you do get multiple formulations. So toppers and, you know, shades with a little bit more base to them, shades that are duochromes and multichromes, which I 100% love. Okay, so those were the 5 brands that I wanted to recommend to someone that's just getting into indie makeup. But before we go, I do have an honorable mention because I wanted to talk about just one more brand that is single eyeshadow focused. Now, all the brands that I showed you guys tend to have a lot of palettes. I know Sydney Grace does do single eyeshadows, so you can get single shadows from them. But I wanted to specifically talk about a single shadow brand that I love, and that is Pretties for Your Face. Yes, this is a Morphe palette because that is where I stole my Pretties for Your Face collection. So these shadows are just stunning, and they are the most affordable shadows you will find on the market. So Pretties for Your Face shadows typically retail for $5 to $10, but she often, the owner, by that I mean the owner often does sales where you can get these products for 50% off, which makes them $2.50 or $5 each. The other great thing about the Pretties for Your Face brand is that she has a number of affiliates, and you can use their codes to get 20% off on top of the sale price. So I'm affiliated with the brand, and my code is just Jamila. It will give you 20% off on top of any sales. I do post a lot of times on my Instagram stories when she's having a sale. And on my Instagram, I have a number of swatches if you were interested in looking at specific shades. And what else? I actually do have a swatch party that I filmed on YouTube, so I will link that in the description box too. But these are some of my absolute favorite single shadows. They are all hand pressed, which honestly does make me feel a little bit better because the amount of time that goes into pressing these shadows by hand just gives it that extra personal touch. I have like 4 or 5 of these Morphe palettes just filled with Pretties for Your Face shadows. Now I do want to swatch a couple of these and just bring it in a little bit closer. You can see how these are all hand pressed because they aren't perfect. You can tell these are not perfectly pressed in the pan. So I'm going to swatch a couple for you guys. So this is one of the more flaky shades, so it definitely has more texture to it. So if you don't like these flakies, I definitely say, you know, watch swatches, because if you don't like having textured shadows, you're not going to love that one. So here we have 3 other shades. This last shade here is what she calls a polymorph, which means that it's one of her multi-chrome shades. So it has several shifts to it. So I'm going to swatch this one, which is a deep, rich blue. Look at that. And I think this $2.50 or $5. Like you can't get that anywhere else. Look at that. It's so pretty. I want to swatch the Shifty shade again on the back of my hand so you guys can really, really see it. So it has a blue purple shift. I'm going to swatch it here. Oh, it's so pretty. So again, Pretties for Your Face, this is my honorable mention. So if you are looking for single eyeshadows and you are not ready to dive into the expensive world of Clionadh, Terra Moons, Davina, and you want something that's a little bit more affordable, I would definitely recommend that you start with Pretties for Your Face. It will give you a great idea of, you know, what kind of textures you like, what kind of bases that you like, what kind of shifts you like. Like I said, make sure to check out the polymorphs on her website, because they are multi-chrome, so you can decide if you like a specific shift before you dive into the more expensive world of like Clionadh, Terra Moons, and all of those. Alright, so I hope that this was a great recommendations video for you guys. If there are other indie brands that you all love and know and trust and want to recommend, leave them down below, because I think that we should definitely be sharing our favorite indie brands in this community. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe and join the family if you are enjoying the content. And of course, as always, share with a friend if you think that they will like the content. I love you guys so very much. Thank you for the support as always, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye!